This podcast is brought to you by the Prospect Research Institute, where researchers come to learn, innovate, and connect.
So a lot of those kind of like cultural questions, those strategy questions, those alignment questions are really important to answer so you know if that opportunity is right for your organization.
Welcome to Prospect Research Chat Bites, a podcast by and for prospect research professionals. I'm Jennifer Filla. Today, I'm talking with Shavonn Richardson, founder of Think and Ink Grants. Hello, Shavonn. Thank you for joining me today on Chat Bites.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Shavonn, I am so glad that you agreed to talk with me today because I really want to hear about your grant writing and particularly prospecting for new foundation funding. But first, I'm wondering if you'd be willing to share, a little bit about how you got started at Bank of America, the other side, and what that experience was like for you.
Thanks for the question, because I do love kind of starting with like my journey, right? And I've had a really unique experience because I've had the opportunity of being on both sides of getting grants and giving grants. So I essentially started my career as a nonprofit leader. I co-founded the nonprofit organization Blue Flowers Org in 2015. And really, honestly, we couldn't afford a grant writer. And so I became the grant writer and got really, really good at it and was able to kind of see that side of getting grants, right? Like that process of submitting applications and building relationships with funders and, really had a very vast exposure to that side. At the very same time, I was also working for the Corporate Social Responsibility Office at Bank of America. And in that role, I was responsible for managing a $1.2 million budget, distributing grants and sponsorships to local Atlanta nonprofit organizations. And so in that role, I was in a position to kind of see the applications that were coming in and seeing why some won and also seeing why others weren't selected. And really having those experiences really encouraged me to launch Think and Ink Grant Consulting in 2016 because I really felt like there was more opportunity to help nonprofit organizations, especially when I saw so many that were not funded. And I just wanted to be in the position to really support nonprofit organizations to increase their funding and to really get over some of the things that I saw as a nonprofit leader that I didn't feel were working for nonprofit leaders.
So when you were at Bank of America, what did you think really worked about the grant giving process? What kind of worked that you were saying, gosh, if only these nonprofits knew that they should be doing this because this works really well. Were there things like that you saw?
I think there's two things that kind of stand out immediately. I think the first one is sometimes nonprofit organizations will submit applications kind of explaining all this great work that their program is doing, their impact in the community, which is great. But sometimes they are not tying the work back to the focus areas of the funder. And so, being a nonprofit leader, you're proud of the work you're doing. You want to tell your story, you want to explain it, you want to show, which is wonderful. But at the end of the day, these funders are supporting a nonprofit organization in their program because it's aligned to the funders' goals, right? And so I think sometimes organizations would miss the mark there by not really aligning the work that they're doing with the funder. I would probably also say the relationship building piece is key too. I think I saw a lot of nonprofit organizations make the mistake of adding a program manager to like a distribution list, like a newsletter. And I would always get these like newsletters in my inbox constantly. And it was actually kind of annoying because when you're getting so many emails a day, an additional email sometimes it's not always welcomed. And, more than likely, you would, unsubscribe or, delete the email without even reading it. So I didn't really find that a good use of some nonprofit leaders' time. But I do remember getting a letter in the mail, which most people rarely get anything in the mail. So to get something in the mail is really unique. Like, hey, what's this? It's a package on my desk. And when I opened the package, it was a letter from one of the beneficiaries of a grant that we gave. And it was written in crayon from a child saying, thank you for supporting our program. I went to summer camp this summer and this is what I did. And thank you so much. I really had a good time. And it had a photo from one of their fundraisers that they recently had. And literally, I was really surprised to get that and was very memorable that I even put it on my wall and I would always kind of see it all the time. So, like, really being kind of creative as far as building relationships and kind of keeping funders in the loop of what you're doing without being overly intrusive.
Sure. I mean, we all get unsolicited emails and added to newsletter lists that we never subscribed, and it's annoying. That's a kind word.
Yeah.
For sure. Okay, so you were at Bank of America. You were starting a nonprofit and also at the same time and applying for grants. And then this culmination of both sides of the coin really inspired you to start your grant writing firm, but that's still a scary thing to do. Why not just join another grant firm? Why start your own?
I think it's rooted in wanting to do things differently. And so, the whole goal of Thinking in Grant Consulting and the reason why we're called Thinking in Grant Consulting, because the think part is the strategic work. And the ink part is the grant writing work. And really starting Thinking in Grant Consulting is the start of a new movement of the strategic work in a nonprofit consulting that comes before the grant writing. And because I did not see that in the marketplace, I didn't see anyone really doing that at that time. And so I felt like it was my responsibility to be in a position where I can offer nonprofit leaders those services. So it never crossed my mind to join another firm because of the way we started. So, we started based on doing something new and really meeting the unique needs of nonprofit leaders.
There's a lot of people who are focused on grant writing, and I've always valued that because it's very different from what I do when I work with individuals and even sometimes companies. That kind of researching prospects is it's just different. I mean, people, the human beings are giving from their own pockets is different from a foundation that has a largesse that they're distributing based on some formal structure. And yet there's crossover because a lot of times, whether you're working as a consultant or whether you're hired in-house as a prospect researcher, there are times when foundation funding makes sense for a project. And we are asked to, find a list of new foundation prospects that the in-house grant writer can write grants to. And that might be a brand new project. It might be an existing program or something. And it's always really challenging. We use Foundation Center online, but that's not everything works with that index. Sometimes the keywords aren't matching and it feels like this slog. Now, you're a pro, like you do this kind of work. So what can you tell us about your experience with prospecting? Like, how do you handle it when a client comes to you and says, "Oh, I need some foundation funding"?
Well, I always start with strategy, right? Being very thoughtful and having a process in place in how to find opportunities and how to evaluate opportunities internally. I know one thing that I do observe is, board members may have this idea of a grant that they feel the organization should apply to, and they bring it to the board, and then the board will just say yay or nay, right? But I think nonprofit leaders that think through a evaluation process and have a rubric in place in how do we evaluate the opportunities that either come to us or those that we seek. And there are a few things, metrics that you can use, and each organization is different. So really thinking through and building one that's based on their specific ideals and what they value. And so, some could be, does an existing relationship exist? Yes or no. Some could be on a scale of 1 to 5 or 1 to 10. One sample question could be the likelihood that we would get it just based on, our past experience as maybe like a final summary. And especially if it's numeric, you can compare it to other opportunities and say, hey, anything that's an 8 or above is something that we'll apply to, and everything else we won't worry about. So I think, that combination of not only being very strategic in finding opportunities, but also having an internal way to evaluate the opportunities once they're presented is really key.
So when you say evaluate the opportunities, do you mean, because I love the scoring idea, totally all about it. And when I've done scoring with prospecting for, companies or foundations, I've usually done it around things like, do they accept unsolicited applications? Yes or no, 0 or 1? Do they give in the location where the organization is going to do the work? Stuff like that. Is that kind of what you mean, or are you talking about something a little different?
That's exactly what I mean. So that's part of it, but like the other part is like the organizational culture part of what do we want to do? Does this align with our strategic plan? So let's say if you have a strategic plan, you have 4 pillars, right? One potential question can be, does this opportunity align with our 4 pillars? Yes or no? And so those questions are kind of above and beyond the typical, do they accept unsolicited applications? Yes or no? You can answer yes or no to that question, and it still may not be the right opportunity. So, it's good information to know so you kind of know, okay, the labor intensiveness of going up after this grant opportunity, but it doesn't really tell you if it's a right fit for your particular organization. So a lot of those kind of like cultural questions, those strategy questions, those alignment questions are really important to answer so if that opportunity is right for your organization.
Wow. So it's a bigger picture look at prospects.
Yeah.
Very interesting. And then one of the other things that happens a lot in the field is, we go ahead, we download from Foundation Center some prospects, maybe we score them and we're like, okay, we've got a good list now. And then we hand over a spreadsheet to whoever's going to be writing the grants. And that's not always useful for them. How do you do your deliverables? I guess you're probably following through with maybe some narrative, or you wouldn't hand over an Excel spreadsheet to your client and say, here are your prospects. What would you do?
We have a system, for lack of a better word, where we do have a deliverable, but it may look very different than other clients because we have specific client resource meetings where we're asking specific questions to understand exactly what the client needs. And our research reports include columns that check the box on answering the questions. And so I know this is kind of like a pie in the sky answer, but it's hard for me to answer that because it's so customized, right? Like it's just based on like understanding the culture of the organization, what their strategy is and what they're looking to do. And we literally create columns based on those responses and make sure that the opportunities meet those requirements. And so we will have opportunities that meet those requirements. We also save the opportunities that don't meet those requirements on a separate page. And the reason being, if that opportunity comes back again, it saves us time because we don't have to reevaluate it. It's like, oh, yeah, we did look at this and we did not pursue it, or it was not included for this reason. So hopefully that answers your question somewhat, but I do think it's important to keep a list of those opportunities that you did consider and decided not to pursue.
I am totally 100% with you on that because that's another thing that starts to happen. If you're not keeping track of your search strategies, you start looking at this, you're like, oh, wait, I saw that name 5 times now. It's much faster if you have already got it on your list and it pops up as a duplicate instead of looking at it all over again. And I like the way that you're focused on what they're trying to accomplish, the purpose for your research and your grant writing. That's so much more persuasive than here's a name. What do you think?
Mm-hmm.
Should we go for it? Before I let you go, when we first met, you mentioned to me that you've been succeeding in your career as an introvert. And this really resonates in the research field. There are a lot of introverts out there. I feel compelled to ask, like, what is your secret? You come across as talking so easily today. How do you do it?
Well, I call myself an extroverted introvert. So if there was a scale of, being a total extrovert or being a total introvert, I'd probably be closer to the extroverted side. I would say, and if you look this up, it's really like the true definition of being an introvert versus an extrovert. It's really based on what activities fulfill you versus what activities drain you. And so for me, reading and writing fulfill me. And although I do a lot of speaking engagements, a lot of presentations, I do a lot of keynote speaking engagements and webinars and different things. And I love to do it, and it's fun, and I'm good at it. But when I am done, it's time for me to take a nap. Because it's very draining for me. So I put routines in place that when I do those things, that I do schedule just some downtime for myself to read a book and do the things that I like to do as an introvert. So that way I'm kind of refueling myself back to where I was before after doing something to me that is so draining. So that's what I do as far as being an introvert.
Thank you so much for sharing today, Shavonn. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
That was Shavonn Richardson, founder of Think and Ink Grants. If you're in fundraising, you know intuitively that you want prospects to align with your organization's mission. But I hadn't quite thought of taking a bird's eye view of how a foundation prospect might align and then scoring that along with all of the usual nitty-gritty details around fit, such as whether we can submit an unsolicited application. Clearly, I need to take another look at the questions I ask clients on my prospecting worksheet. And if you want to learn more from Shavonn, you can find her blog on her company website, www.thinkandinkgrants.com. She also serves as a thought leader and member of the Forbes Business Council, and included in the show notes, I've given you a link to her profile and the articles she's contributed on Forbes. Hey, if you enjoyed listening to this podcast, you have to come check out the Prospect Research Institute's learning community. It's a membership community with powerful resources, great discussions, and comprehensive courses. Check it out at member.prospectresearchinstitute.org. I'd love to have you join me as a member of the learning community. See you there.